"Do you have salt?" That was the first thing the human said after the screaming stopped, and I need you to understand something before you judge us for the silence that followed. On Gate, silence was not natural. The station was 6 miles of steel, glass, engines, gamblers, hunters, traders, smugglers, and predators wearing formal jackets over instincts sharp enough to cut through conversation. Something was always clicking, humming, growling, laughing, bargaining, or threatening to eat something else. But when Logan Hayes stood in the center of the Grand Hunt Hall with a kitchen knife in one hand and the galaxy's most feared apex predator lying still beside the serving platform, every sound in the room died, like someone had unplugged reality. 300 honored hunters stared at him. 12 security officers forgot the weapons in their hands. Varric Thorn, champion of the Outer Clades, had gone so pale beneath his bronze scales that he looked unfinished. And Logan, the soft little human we had mocked less than an hour earlier, looked down at the creature that had once made entire colonies abandon moons and asked, in the calmest voice I had ever heard, if anybody had salt. Not a trophy blade, not a victory chant, not a demand for respect. Salt. As if this were not the Vorik Prime. As if this were not the living nightmare our ancestors carved into warning stones. As if the thing at his feet were not the reason every child of every predator species was taught never to follow warm tracks into a dark valley. He just glanced toward the banquet kitchen, wiped one hand on his plain white apron, and said, "Kosher would be great, but table salt works." I remember my translator hesitating on the word kosher, like even the machine wanted no responsibility for what was happening. My name is Krell Voss, ceremonial master of the Grand Hunt, and before that moment I believed I understood the food chain. Everyone on Gate did. The strong hunted. The clever survived. The weak learned manners. Humans, we had decided, belonged in that last category. They were polite. They apologized when bumped. They wrapped their food in leaves and paper. They cut it into harmless little portions. They heated meat before eating it, which every hunter in the hall understood as fear disguised as culture. A species that feared raw meat, we thought, could never truly understand the hunt. That was the joke. That was why Logan Hayes had been invited. Not as a guest of honor. Not really. He was entertainment, a novelty from Earth, a frontier cook with broad shoulders, quiet eyes, and a canvas bag full of powders that smelled like campfires, pepper, and old dirt roads after rain. He was supposed to stand there while the great hunters laughed. He was supposed to flinch when the cage doors opened. He was supposed to remind us how far above humanity the galaxy's true predators stood. Instead, 47 minutes after we called him soft, Logan Hayes asked for salt, and every predator in the room finally understood that Earth had never produced prey. Earth had produced something that looked at monsters and wondered what temperature they should be cooked at. 47 minutes before the hall forgot how to breathe, Logan Hayes walked through Gate 7 carrying a canvas knife roll, a dented spice tin, and the relaxed expression of a man arriving at a county barbecue instead of the most prestigious hunting ceremony in 6 sectors. That was the first mistake we made. We saw the apron folded over his arm and decided it was a surrender flag. We saw the plain boots, the faded blue shirt, the sun-browned hands, and the little scar across one knuckle, and we filed him away as harmless before he had crossed the first security arch. I personally checked his invitation twice because I thought there had been an error. Cultural food representative from Earth, it said. Frontier culinary specialist. Former wilderness instructor. No noble house. No formal clan trophies. No ceremonial hunt record recognized by the Concord Registry. Just Logan Hayes from Montana, a place our database described as rural, mountainous, cold, and full of large mammals with poor attitudes. That last detail amused me at the time. Imagine thinking a few 4-legged forest animals could prepare anyone for Gate. The Grand Hunt Hall had been prepared for intimidation, not hospitality. 50-foot banners hung from the ceiling, each one stitched with the symbol of a victorious predator lineage. The tables were black stone, chilled from within, laid with cuts of raw ceremonial meat from creatures most species would rather study from orbit. Silver bowls of blood wine steamed beside bone-handled carving forks. The air smelled of iron, smoke, expensive oils, and competitive ego. Logan paused just inside the entrance, looked around slowly, and nodded like he was inspecting a restaurant before the dinner rush. That made several guests laugh. Not loudly at first, Just the private clicking, huffing, throat-deep sounds of powerful beings enjoying a creature that did not know it was the joke. Varric Thorn noticed him immediately. Of course he did. Varric noticed anything smaller than himself the way storms notice loose roofs. He was 8 feet tall, armored in bronze scales, wrapped in a white hunting cloak, and followed by 3 attendants whose entire job was to carry his trophies and laugh before everyone else remembered to. He approached Logan with that lazy confidence champions use when they believe the room belongs to them. "Mr. Hayes," he said, letting the translator make the human name sound smaller than it was. "Welcome to the table of real hunters." Logan gave him a polite smile. "Happy to be here. I was told you wanted an earth cooking demonstration." That smile made the room worse. Predators do not trust calm things. Calm can mean asleep, stupid, or waiting. We assumed the second. Varric lifted a silver tray from a nearby servant and presented Logan with a dark red slab of ceremonial meat, still cold, still glossy, still decorated with frost crystals from the preservation vault. The room leaned in. This was an old test. A guest either accepted the raw bite and earned a little respect, refused, and became entertainment, or hesitated and became legend for all the wrong reasons. Logan looked at the meat. He did not recoil. He did not swallow nervously. He simply bent closer, smelled it once, and frowned with honest disappointment. "You do not age it?" he asked. Varric blinked. The translator handled the words perfectly, but not the insult hidden inside them. "Age it," Varric repeated. Logan nodded toward the tray. "Rest it. Season it. Bring it to temperature. Give the muscle time to relax. You all just pull something out of a freezer and call it culture?" For 3 full seconds, nobody laughed because nobody understood that the human had just insulted 6,000 years of hunting tradition with the tone of a disappointed uncle at a backyard cookout. Then Varric threw back his head and roared with amusement, and the hall followed him because following champions is easier than thinking. "Soft," he announced. "The human is not afraid of meat. He is afraid it has not been pampered enough." Logan straightened, still polite, still relaxed, but his eyes changed by half an inch. Not anger, not fear, measurement, like he had just learned the weight of the room and found it lighter than expected. I should have noticed that. We all should have. Instead, I stepped forward, lifted my ceremonial staff, and welcomed the guests to the Feast of Hunters, completely unaware that the smallest predator in the hall had already started judging our preparation. The Feast of Hunters began the way every important lie begins, with music, ceremony, and people pretending confidence was the same thing as control. I raised my staff, the ceiling lights dimmed to a deep amber, and the grand hunt hall answered with a low ceremonial rumble from 100 hidden drums beneath the floor. The sound was designed to feel like a heartbeat larger than your own. It made young hunters stand taller. It made old hunters remember victories that had improved with every retelling. It made guests believe they belonged to something ancient, brutal, and permanent. Logan Hayes stood near the end of the central table, looking mildly interested, as if he were listening to a good band warm up before a football game. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The central table stretched almost 100 feet, carved from black asteroid stone and polished until it reflected the banners above it. Every seat had been arranged by rank, species, hunt record, and political usefulness, because even predators enjoy pretending hierarchy is tradition. Instead of insecurity with furniture, Varric Thorn sat at the high end beneath the white skull crest of his house, accepting admiration like a star accepting planets. Around him gathered the Vorash Claw Lords, the silver-eyed Malcari Trackers, the red-plumed Sereth Duelists, and 3 representatives from the Bone Meridian, each one famous enough that their names made lesser hunters lower their voices. Then there was Logan, placed deliberately beside the kitchen service arch, far from the honored seats, near the steam vents and prep counters. A convenient location, we said. A practical courtesy for a cook, we said. It was an insult arranged with tableware. Logan noticed. He had to. Humans notice placement. Their eyes are strange that way, always forward, always measuring distance, exits, hands, heat, mood. But he did not complain. He simply set his spice tin on the counter, unfolded his knife roll with careful hands, and checked each blade like a musician tuning strings. Not weapons. Tools. That was what I told myself. Tools could not embarrass champions. Tools could not change a room. Tools could not make the old families nervous. Then the servers entered with the first course, and the hall came alive. Platters passed under blue flame lamps. Bowls of chilled marrow custard moved between jeweled claws. Crystal cups filled with dark mineral broth. Every dish was meant to display dominance over nature, over hunger, over fear itself. The guests sampled, judged, laughed, boasted. Logan watched the food travel from table to table, and his expression became harder to read. Not disgusted, not impressed, more like disappointed by wasted potential. One of the Malcarry trackers noticed him staring and called across the table, "Earthman, is our food too honest for you?" A few guests laughed. Logan looked up. "Honest is not the word I would use," he said. The tracker showed all 6 teeth. "Then what word would you use?" Logan picked up a small pinch of gray spice from his tin, rubbed it between his fingers, and glanced at the untouched slabs on the ceremonial trays. "Unfinished," he said. The laughter came faster this time, but it had a thinner sound. I remember that clearly. Laughter is easy when everyone agrees on the joke. It becomes work when the joke starts looking back. Varric leaned in his chair, amused but watching now. Truly watching. "Tell us, human," he said, "what does Earth teach its cooks that the great hunters of the galaxy have missed?" Logan closed his spice tin with a soft click that somehow carried across the table. "Patience," he said. "Heat control. Respect for the animal." Then he looked at the frozen centerpiece waiting beneath its silver cover and added, "And the basic idea that dangerous does not mean delicious unless somebody knows what they are doing." Varric Thorn should have let the insult pass. A wiser champion would have smiled, raised a cup, and allowed the strange little Earthman to remain a curiosity by the kitchen arch. But champions do not become champions by sharing attention, and Logan Hayes had just stolen a sliver of Varric's room without raising his voice. I saw it happen. Every hunter at the central table was still laughing, but their eyes had shifted. Not fully, not respectfully, just enough. They were no longer looking at Logan as furniture. That was dangerous to Varric, and Varric responded the way powerful fools always respond when their pride feels a draft. He made the joke bigger. He stood slowly, letting his cloak slide back over his shoulders, letting the ceiling lamps catch the polished ridges of his scales, letting the whole hall remember who had the trophies and who had the apron. Then he lifted his cup and called for silence. It came immediately. Even the drums beneath the floor softened to a distant pulse. "Our human guest," Varric said, "has honored us with criticism. A cook from a rain-soaked rock at the edge of civilized maps has looked upon the grand feast and found it unfinished." A wave of amused sounds rolled through the hall. Logan remained at the counter, hands resting lightly on either side of his spice tin. Varric turned toward him with a smile wide enough to be ceremonial and cruel enough to be honest. "So let us learn from Earth. Tell us, Logan Hayes, when your people first saw meat, did you hide behind fire because you were cold, or because you were afraid it might look back?" That one landed. The hall erupted. Claws struck tables. Cups lifted. Several of the younger hunters mimicked shivering, wrapping their arms around themselves as though humans were tiny, frightened children lost in winter. I almost laughed too. Then I looked at Logan. He was not smiling now. He was not angry either, which would have been easier to understand. Anger has edges. Anger announces itself. Logan simply studied Varric with the patient expression of a man deciding whether a conversation was still worth saving. We should have taken that as mercy. Varric did not. He signaled to an attendant, who hurried forward carrying a narrow black case sealed with 3 magnetic locks. The crowd quieted with interest. I recognized the case and felt a small tightening in my throat. Inside was not food for guests. It was a relic sample, a preserved strip from a failed hunt decades earlier, taken from a creature so feared that even naming it during dinner was considered dramatic. Varric opened the case and lifted the sample with silver tongs. The air changed at once, sharp and wild, and unpleasantly alive despite the preservation field. Several guests leaned away. Logan leaned in half an inch. Varric noticed and mistook curiosity for discomfort. "This," he said, "is from a Vorik prime. The closest thing the galaxy has to hunger wearing a body. Most species cannot stand the scent. Some cannot stand the idea." He lowered the tongs toward Logan's station. "Tell me, Earth Cook, would your precious fire make this gentle enough for your little stomach?" Logan looked at the sample. Then he looked past it, toward the locked display doors at the far end of the hall, where the full ceremonial cage waited beneath a curtain of red light. His voice stayed quiet. You brought the whole animal here, did you not? No one laughed. Varric's smile twitched. For the closing ceremony, yes. Logan nodded once, as if a missing puzzle piece had clicked into place. Then stop waving around leftovers, he said. If you want an honest opinion, bring out the fresh one. The command to bring out the fresh one should have belonged to Varric. That was the ritual. The champion announced the final display, the lights fell, the drums rose, and the honored beast was revealed as proof that civilized predators could place terror in a cage and call it tradition. But Logan Hayes had said it first, and that ruined the rhythm of everything. Varric's attendants looked at him, waiting. The hunters looked at the curtain of red light. I looked at Logan, hoping to see fear arrive late. It did not. He was already clearing space on the prep counter. That may have been the most offensive thing he did all night. Not the insult, not the calm voice. The counter. He moved bowls, folded towels, adjusted a heating plate, and checked the overhead vents as if the Grand Hunt Hall had become his kitchen by simple decision. Varric recovered with a sharp gesture. Very well, he said. Let Earth learn what real meat looks like before it becomes history. The crowd approved, but the sound was different now. Louder than necessary. Confidence with extra paint on it. At the far end of the hall, 6 handlers in white armor approached the containment platform. The floor beneath them unlocked in sections, and a circular lift rose from the lower vault with a deep mechanical groan. The red curtain dissolved. The cage appeared. It was not beautiful. It was not ceremonial. It was ugly engineering, layered alloy ribs, magnetic anchors, shock barriers, and thick viewing panels scratched by something that had disliked being studied. Inside stood the Vorik Prime. Every conversation died at once. Even behind containment, the creature changed the room. It was larger than a draft horse, low through the shoulders, built like motion waiting for permission. Its hide was a dark charcoal gray with pale ridges along the spine, and its eyes reflected the banquet lights with a steady golden focus that felt almost rude. It did not thrash. It did not roar for show. It looked at us like it was choosing what mattered. That was worse. A young Sereth hunter near my station took one step back and pretended he had meant to. A Malcary tracker lowered his cup without drinking. One of Varric's attendants forgot to keep laughing. Logan wiped his hands on a towel and leaned slightly to the left, studying the cage through the gap between 2 guests. How much does it weigh? He asked. I answered before I realized I had been spoken to. Around 900 pounds. Maybe more. Logan nodded. What has it been eating? The question struck me as absurd. Eating? I repeated. Yes, Logan said. Diet matters. Stress matters too. If you have been keeping it angry for the ceremony, that is going to affect texture. The hall stared at him. The Vorik Prime stared at him. Varric laughed once, but it came out too short. Texture, he said. The human is concerned about texture. Logan looked at the cage locks, then at the handlers, then at the distance between the platform and the kitchen arch. I am concerned about a lot of things, he said. Mostly your containment spacing. I felt my crest tighten. The handlers had begun attaching ceremonial guidelines to rotate the cage toward the central table. It was standard procedure. It had been done with lesser beasts for generations. But the Vorik Prime shifted its weight, just once, and the platform gave a tiny metallic complaint. Logan heard it. So did I. Varric did not. He was too busy performing courage for the room. Bring it closer, he ordered. Let our guest from Earth smell greatness before he seasons it. The handlers obeyed. The platform rolled forward 12 feet, then 20, then 30. The creature lowered its head. Logan stepped away from the counter, not backward, just sideways, toward the open kitchen line. His right hand found the handle of his largest knife, but he did not lift it yet. He only said, very softly, you may want to stop moving that cage. Varric smiled at the audience. He thinks it is dangerous. Logan's eyes stayed on the floor anchors. No, he said. I think it knows exactly where the weak point is. The floor anchor gave a sound so small most of the room missed it, a thin metallic tick under the drums, under the laughter, under Varric Thorne's grand performance of courage. Logan Hayes did not miss it. His head turned half an inch. That was all. No panic, no dramatic shout, no heroic speech. Just half an inch, the way a man hears a rattlesnake in dry grass before anyone else understands why the birds have gone quiet. The Vorik Prime shifted again inside. The cage, slow and deliberate, pressing its weight not against the thick front bars where the handlers expected resistance, but down and sideways into the left guide rail. The platform complained. A blue warning light blinked once near the base. One handler looked down. Logan said, "Stop." Nobody did. The second tick came louder. The third was not a tick at all. It was a snap that traveled through the Grand Hunt Hall like a cracked bone in the architecture of our confidence. The left guide rail dropped 2 inches. The containment field flickered. Every hunter in the room suddenly remembered an urgent reason to be farther away. Chairs scraped backward. Cups tipped over. Someone shouted for the handlers to re-engage the locks. Someone else shouted the exact opposite. Varric lifted one hand, trying to turn chaos back into ceremony by gesture alone, which is a wonderful plan if the universe respects hand gestures. The Vorik Prime lowered its head, exhaled once against the weakening field, and the air shimmered like hot pavement in July. Then the cage door buckled open just enough for all of us to understand that our ancestors had built stories around this creature for a reason. It did not explode into the room. That would have been easier. It stepped out, calmly, carefully, like a king entering a hall that had always belonged to him. The first line of hunters scattered so fast their expensive cloaks tangled around table legs. A Vorash clawlord vaulted over a banquet bench and landed in a dessert display. 2 Malkari trackers collided near the wine fountain and pretended it was tactical repositioning. Varric's attendants abandoned his trophy case without even looking back. I would mock them, but I had already taken 4 steps behind a pillar and was considering a 5th. The Vorik Prime ignored most of us. That was the insult. It looked past the champions, past the banners, past the weapons, and fixed its golden eyes on the only creature in the room that had not retreated. Logan stood at the open kitchen line with one hand on the counter and the other near his knife roll. Not gripping. Near. The difference felt important. Steam curled behind him from the heating. Plates. His spice tin sat open beside a bowl of coarse salt. The absurdity of it made my thoughts stumble. The galaxy's nightmare had just walked free, and the human had arranged his seasonings. The creature took 1 step toward him, then another. Its head lowered, nostrils widening as it pulled in Logan's scent. The hall held its breath. Varric finally found his voice. Human move. Logan did not look at him. He watched the animal's shoulders, its breathing, the rhythm of its feet on the stone. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady, almost annoyed. Everybody stopped yelling. Nobody obeyed at first, because terror is not famous for listening. Then Logan picked up a metal pan and struck it once against the counter. The sound cracked through the hall, sharp and clean. The shouting stopped. The Vorik Prime paused. Logan nodded, not to us, but to the creature, as if they had just reached the first honest moment of the evening. "There you are," he said softly. "Not a monster. Just stressed, hungry, and surrounded by idiots." I was offended for approximately 1 second. Then the Vorik Prime took another step toward the kitchen, and Logan Hayes reached for the stove instead of the exit. Logan did not move like a soldier. That was the first thing that broke Varric's face. Champions expect stances, charges, weapons raised high, the old theater of strength announcing itself before impact. Logan gave us none of that. He turned 1 stove burner to high, slid a cast iron skillet onto the heat, and tossed a handful of coarse salt across the hot surface. The salt jumped and cracked. The Vorik Prime stopped. Its golden eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in attention. Logan had not challenged it. He had interrupted its senses. The steam vents breathed warm air behind him. The skillet began to smoke faintly. He reached for a small bottle from his spice tin and tipped a few drops onto the pan. The smell hit the room like a memory none of us owned. Sharp pepper, smoke, fat, pine resin, and something sweet underneath. Every predator in the hall reacted before pride could stop us. Heads lifted, nostrils flared. Even Varric leaned forward 1/2 inch, then caught himself and looked. Furious about it. The Vorik Prime took 1 slow step sideways, following the scent. Logan took 1 slow step the other way, placing the counter between them without making it look like retreat. That was when I understood, with a cold little twist beneath my ribs, that he was not trying to overpower the creature. He was reading it. The angle of its head, the pause before each step, the way its weight shifted when the pan hissed, the way its attention snapped toward heat faster than toward motion. This was not combat as we taught it. This was older, quieter, less interested in looking brave. The beast lunged toward the scent, not toward Logan, and Logan was already gone from the space it expected him to occupy. He moved behind the prep island, flipped on the overhead fire suppression mist, and filled the air with a thin curtain of cool vapor. The Vorik Prime slowed, confused by a room that suddenly smelled like rain, iron, pepper, and hot stone. Logan clicked his tongue once. Not loudly, not foolishly, just enough. The creature turned. He tossed a folded kitchen towel toward the floor on its left side. Its eyes followed the motion. Logan's right hand moved to the stove controls. The burner flared bright blue. Heat rolled across the tiles. The Vorik Prime recoiled from the sudden thermal wall, not hurt, just redirected, exactly as Logan intended. Vorik whispered, impossible, but he whispered it in a room where every microphone caught fear beautifully. Logan reached the emergency storage rack and pulled down a long-handled service hook, the kind used to move heavy roasting frames. In his hands, it did not look ceremonial. It looked practical. He used it to guide, block, and turn, never striking for glory, never wasting motion. Each movement asked the creature a question. Each answer made the next movement smaller. The Vorik Prime grew slower, not defeated by force, but boxed in by heat, sound, scent, and a human who seemed to understand panic better than the creature experiencing it. Then Logan did something no hunter in that hall would have considered. He lowered his voice and spoke to it. Easy, he said. You are not the problem here. The creature froze. So did we. Logan held its gaze for one heartbeat. Then two, his shoulders loose, his breathing steady, his hand resting near the skillet as if this were still only dinner delayed by poor management. I had spent my career believing predators recognized dominance through size, teeth, and trophies. Watching Logan Hayes in that kitchen, I learned some predators recognize something worse. Competence. The moment the Vorik Prime stopped fighting the room, Logan changed the room. That was the part none of us understood until later. We thought the human had trapped the beast. We thought he had cornered it with heat and mist and scent, like some clever little kitchen trick. But Logan Hayes was not cornering anything. He was calming it down enough to make a choice possible. He kept his eyes on the creature, lifted one hand slowly, and pointed the service hook toward the open containment platform. Not at the beast. Toward the cage. The Vorik Prime watched the hook, then watched Logan. Its breathing was still heavy, but no longer wild. The hall remained frozen behind overturned chairs and abandoned cups. Vorik stood near the high table with his cloak half twisted around one arm, trying to look like a commander instead of a statue waiting for permission to move. Logan spoke without looking away from the animal. Krell, he said, does that cage have a manual softlock from the outside? I nearly missed my own name. Yes, I answered. On the right side. Blue lever. Good. When I say now, pull it. Vorik hissed, you take orders from the cook now? I did not answer him, which was answer enough. Logan reached for the skillet with his free hand and tilted it just slightly, letting the warm peppered smoke drift toward the containment ramp. The Vorik Prime followed the scent one careful step at a time. It did not look defeated. That was important. It looked offended, curious, and exhausted by our stupidity. Logan backed away at the exact same pace, guiding it without rushing, never giving it a reason to remember fear. When its front feet crossed the platform edge, every hunter in the hall leaned forward despite themselves. When its full weight settled inside the cage, Logan gave one soft click of his tongue. Now, I pulled the blue lever. The softlock engaged with a deep magnetic thrum. The barrier returned, stable and clean. The room exhaled all at once. Some guests tried to cheer. It failed immediately because Logan had already turned away from the cage as if the legendary crisis had been a kitchen spill. He walked back to Varric's black case, picked up the preserved Vorik sample with tongs, and looked at it under the prep light. This one, he said, is dry on the edges, over-chilled, and badly stored. Varric's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Logan trimmed away the ruined part with two neat motions so ordinary that somehow they felt insulting. Then he seasoned the remaining cut with salt, cracked pepper, and a red spice he called smoked paprika. The skillet hissed when the meat touched iron. That sound did more damage to our pride than the escaped beast ever had. The smell rose slowly, rich and warm, filling the Grand Hunt Hall with something none of us were prepared for. Not terror. Not trophy. Food. Real food. Hunters who had mocked human cooking began to stare at the pan like children outside a diner window in December. A Vorash clawlord swallowed loudly. One of the Malkari whispered, "That cannot be the same animal." Logan flipped the cut once, calm as Sunday morning, then added a small piece of butter that melted into the spices with a soft golden foam. Varric finally found his voice. "You turned a sacred predator into a tavern meal." Logan placed the cooked slice on a white plate, let it rest, and looked up at him. "No," he said. "I treated it better than you did." No one reached for the plate at first. That may sound strange, considering the entire Grand Hunt Hall had spent the evening proving how fearless it was in front of food, but fear changes shape when pride has nowhere left to stand. A few minutes earlier, the honored hunters of 6 sectors had treated Logan Hayes like a soft curiosity from a backward planet. Now the same quiet human stood beside a stove, one hand resting on a towel, while the warm scent from his cooking drifted across our banners, our trophies, and our 1,000 polished lies about what strength was supposed to look like. Varric Thorn stared at the plate as if it had personally insulted his bloodline. In a way, it had. That simple white dish had done what no rival champion had ever managed. It made him look small. Logan did not gloat. That bothered Varric more than mockery would have. A cruel person would have smiled. A proud one would have demanded applause. Logan simply waited, because on Earth, apparently, even victory needed to rest before serving. I stepped forward before I understood I had decided to. The hall watched me. My hand trembled once when I picked up the tasting fork, and I hated that every camera probably caught it. I told myself I was fulfilling ceremonial duty. I told myself someone had to preserve dignity. The truth was worse. I wanted to know. I tasted the smallest piece I could manage. Then the entire galaxy became very quiet inside my head. It was not raw power. It was not trophy. It was not the cold metallic pride we had been calling tradition all night. It was smoke, salt, heat, patience, and something deep that reminded the body it was older than civilization. I understood, in one bite, why humans gathered around fire long before they built cities, why they carried spices across oceans, why they could turn survival into memory and memory into family dinner. Varric saw my expression and knew he had lost before I spoke. "Well," he demanded. I put the fork down carefully. "It is better than ours," I said. Not louder than necessary. That made it worse. The words moved through the hall like a door opening in a sealed room. One by one, hunters looked away from Varric and toward Logan. Not with hunger alone. With recognition. The Vorik Prime rested safely behind the restored barrier, watching us with the bored dignity of a creature that had survived both our arrogance and our ceremony. Logan glanced at it, then back to the plate. "You keep calling it sacred," he said, "but respect is not the same as fear." That sentence ended the grand hunt more completely than any alarm could have. Varric sat down. He did not bow. He did not apologize. He simply sat, because standing required a kind of certainty he no longer possessed. Later, the official report would say the ceremony was interrupted by a containment failure and resolved through interspecies cooperation. Official reports are where truth goes to wear a clean shirt. What actually happened was simpler. We learned that humans did not cook because they feared the wild. They cooked because they had met the wild in the dark, studied it, survived it, thanked it, improved it, and invited their children to the table. We had believed the food chain was a ladder, with the largest teeth at the top. Earth had taught Logan Hayes something different. The top was not where the biggest predator stood. The top was where someone could face danger, understand it, calm it, season it, and still ask if anyone else was hungry. That night, every hunter left Karen Gate with the same private thought, though none of us dared say it aloud. Humans were never trying to become predators. They had gone past that a long time ago.